This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
Baby, what a win this one is! The most patient fans in the league, right to the dog pound, up and in he goes! The rookie out of Georgia goes right side 40, 45, 50, he stumbles a little bit to the 40, he's to the 30, 25, 20, 50, 10, 5, touchdown!
Greetings, Dog Pound Nation. Welcome to the Two Green Brands podcast, part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. I'm John Cahill. I am not joined by Neil Dunworth today, but you can check out all of our media output on brownsaccess.com. Before we start, please go check out our friends Zabo Apparel in Vermilion, Ohio, purveyors of the finest apparel in Ohio. Get online, buy their each other or support each other shirt, who you will be helping out local families with that purchase. Very welcome to the show, everyone. Today, back doing our fan podcasts again. Had a great reaction to everything we've done in the last week or so. So today we have Connor Nolan, another Irish Browns fan. Connor, welcome to the show.
Thanks a million for having me. It's great to be here. You know, I've been wanting to do this for quite a while. I've been listening for quite a while as well. So, you know, I'm quite a new Browns fan myself. So, the last few years, starting was pretty hard, but starting to really get into the swing of things now.
Tell me this, Connor. Whereabouts in the timeline in the last few years have you jumped on?
So it was actually probably the worst time to jump on. It was during the 0-16 season. So it's a funny story. You might think, oh well, why? If you're starting to get into American football, why would you choose an 0-16 team or a team on the way to going 0-16 as your team to really get behind? And I guess that's mainly because I was a Cleveland Cavaliers supporter. So when I said, right, I'm going to make the jump to American football, I said, I'm not going to be one of those people that people look down upon and say they're a glory hunter or whatever. They want a bandwagon fan. So I said that I'll stick with Cleveland. And then it just so happened that when I really got into it, then I was like, oh, the Browns are going 0-16. Oh, great. You know, it's kind of that underdog story. And I think that really goes with the dog pound aesthetic. But just being behind an underdog, and as a Chelsea fan in soccer, etc., I'm sort of used to teams constantly winning. So it was a different thing to actually be behind a team that was on or coming from rock bottom essentially, and to actually go through that with the team, with the fans, etc. It's a different feeling, and it was something that once we do win something, it'll mean so much more, you know. And it was the same sort of feeling with the Cavs as well when LeBron came back.
And have you been into the basketball for long, Connor? I've been trying. In the last year, I've much like yourself have done from basketball to football. I've got into baseball, something I never thought I'd get into, to be honest.
Yeah.
I accidentally fell into baseball with the Indians in the last year, and it's been fantastic. I can't get my head around basketball just yet. I can't even sitting down and watching. And it's not. I've tried to watch the Cavaliers, and it's not. I know, and people have said it to me like, "Oh, the Cavs just aren't good at the minute." Blah blah blah. That's not the issue. I obviously have no issue supporting a shit team. But that's not the issue. The issue for me is like basketball itself. I think there's something not clicking with me. I don't appear to get it. I don't know what I'm missing.
Yeah, well, I think for me personally, it was an easier jump to make because I was playing it so much in school, and I was really getting into it in a playing sense. And it's the same, I think, with like GAA or soccer in general. When you're playing a sport, it's much easier then for you to really get behind it and follow it. And I think that was one of the reasons why I was kind of reluctant to get behind the NFL initially, was because there's a few people I knew and they were sort of getting into it. But with the time zones and just the accessibility of the NFL a few years ago, I found it was a bit harder to access. And then I wasn't playing it, so I didn't have the passion there from actually playing to transfer over. And that took me a while. So I think that was one of the reasons why I was found it much easier to get into basketball, was because I had that kind of playing and I was really into it that way. So as well, when it comes to basketball, there's so many rules that I kind of found it easy to get my head across the rules because I was playing. But my friend who doesn't play, I was showing him NBA 2K one night and he was just really lost. And I was like, why are you lost? And then I started to realize as I was breaking down the rules as we were going through the game, I was like, oh, well, there actually are a lot of rules. And I found that with the NFL, I had to do a similar sort of thing where when I initially said, right, I'm doing this, I'm getting into it, I sat down and much to the detriment of college, I opened up the laptop and I just started watching YouTube, rules. And I was just watching a ton of highlights of different players, Lawrence Taylor and all these sort of players. And just to sort of get a feel and a vibe, especially all those videos about the big hits and stuff, because that really gets you hyped for it. But I think that basketball is one of those sports that I feel that when you're playing it, it's much easier to get into. But I do think if you just keep watching and keep getting a feel, especially if you're watching players like LeBron play, it really gets you a bit more into the sport. Whereas if you're watching the Cavs at the moment, although obviously you have no issue, as you said, supporting a shit team, it can be a bit sort of hard to get into it initially because of how bad we play. It's kind of not a great advertisement for the sport, I guess. But yeah, no, and even with regards to the NFL, now that I'm supporting that, my consumption of basketball has sort of took a downturn because you're sort of, when I have the three-pronged sort of sports, soccer, basketball and NFL, and you kind of hard to prioritize time for all of them, especially when you have your own life as well with college or family. So basketball-wise, that sort of went to the back burner a tiny bit. Although in China, I was in China for a year, and then that would have been quite a big sort of thing over there. Basketball is massive in China, so I would have been playing a lot of it there. But in terms of just watching it, I haven't been as active as I would be with the NFL, because I think I'm still in that kind of learning phase with the NFL at times, where although I know all the rules or I know all the players that are on every team nearly, it's still kind of you're learning to adapt to the sport and learning just little intricate things. So you kind of have to put everything else to the back burner to really focus on that sport when you're getting new to it, I guess.
Yeah, we're at a huge disadvantage, Connor. With not having the game to play at a certain. Now, look, I played here in IAFL, and I don't know if you know this, but you have a team only up the road from you.
Yeah.
IFL, the Wexford Eagles. So like, I would advise you, a fit, young, healthy man like yourself, get out and try out for the Wexford Eagles, and go and have a go. It's great crack. It is brilliant crack. And the amount you learn from playing, even at it, probably the lowest level you can possibly play American football. You know, it is a real learning curve. So for me, I was kind of lucky in a way that I'm following the NFL since about 1987, 88. And it's always been, I was a big Man United fan growing up with the soccer here, and we also got the NFL on TV. There was an RTE show on once a week, I think on Monday nights or something like that, a highlights program. So from that kind of aspect, I was quite lucky, because a lot of people I know, like what you've described there, you've come to it later on, you know, in life, and you don't have that advantage. Like, and the advantage I find that a lot of time, a lot of guests who get onto the show here, I get them on to explain football stuff to us, the technical football stuff, because like the draft, anyone can follow the draft, you know, and there's loads of players broken down for the draft, and you can read draft reports and scouting reports and stuff like that. And as a Cleveland fan, you'll get used to being the draft. Well, hopefully you won't get used to the draft being the centerpiece of your year. It has been the centerpiece of my football year for 20 years, because, you know, there wasn't a whole lot else positive going on. So you kind of naturally become a draft fan. But like what you're saying there with the football, you can't watch enough tape of good players, you know, and that's really where you're going to learn. Tell me this, you described there, like, you know, much like everyone growing up in Ireland, you'll have your English football team, soccer team to support. Everyone kind of has their own there as well. Being where you are there and where you grew up, I don't see any hurling memorabilia around you there.
No. Which is strange considering how big Wexford is. I was going to wear my county top though, because I used to play Gaelic football for the county.
Oh, very good.
For the underage. But you know, so really I was much more into Gaelic football than I was hurling, which is obviously strange for a Wexford man. But it was kind of hard because the Gaelic football side of things is very much underfunded here, and but I still played hurling and everything because my club wouldn't allow me to play Gaelic football if I wouldn't play hurling. So but no, GAA has never really been that important to me because I think at an early age I got so big into soccer and that became my sport, and I put most of my passion and everything into that I didn't really have time to transfer any passion to the GAA. Whereas now I had a foot injury recently as well where I couldn't play soccer itself, so that was much more but I could still play basketball, so I think that was another sort of thing where my even consumption of soccer went down a bit, and that allowed me to consume a bit more NFL and basketball. And I think China as well was a big help because with the time zones the way they are here, and you'll notice yourself, it's very tough sometimes to be up at 3 a.m. or 1 a.m. to watch a game and actually consume it. It's easy enough to maybe stay up and watch it, but it's very hard to actually take it in. Whereas in China, the games were on at 6 a.m. or 9 a.m. So I was up in the morning or whatever anyway, and it was very much easier for me to watch live games, and not just Browns games, because as I said, I'm still relatively new to the sport, so my whole thing is about consuming as much of football as possible. So I was able to watch with Game Pass, which is amazing. I was able to watch as much games as possible, and it was actually just lucky that I was in China for the year, that I had the time zones were a bit easier for me to actually digest it.
Yeah, no, I find the 1 p.m., which is the 6 p.m. kickoffs here, are on a Sunday, are fantastic for me because it's like weekend's over. Everyone knows to piss off and leave me alone at 6 o'clock on Sunday evening. That's my time. That's my time.
Yeah.
So everyone kind of knows that. The problems I've had in the last year now, and it mightn't be something you're familiar with yourself, but in over the years as a Browns fan, you get used to the 1 p.m. kickoff.
Yeah, of course,
because we don't get primetime games. And this year it was an absolute nightmare. These the Thursday night game, the Monday night game, the late kickoffs on a Sunday, they're an absolute killer. Now, I was blessed this year that my work changed a fraction and I had Mondays off. So I went to work on a 4-day week, which was an absolute gift, because it means I can stay up till 3 or 4 o'clock on Sunday morning and watch all the games, watch the games and everything. So it's been great for my consumption of NFL. And I think it's an interesting point you bring up there as well about how all-consuming it can be and how much time you have to devote to other sports. Like I would have described myself as an avid Man United fan for years, and I suppose in the last 10 years, and not just since United have started losing, but even before they started losing, my interest in following Premier League kind of dipped a fair bit because I was investing a lot more time in American football, and I think that was with the advent of me finding Twitter. Like I would have been supporting the Browns since the expansion franchise came back, and so that's about 20 years now. But when I mean supporting for me 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 16 years, was a very different thing. It was buying a magazine and watching highlights every now and then. It was the all immersive experience that you have now when you have this little bubble on Twitter that, I only use Twitter really for football. Like, you know what I mean? I don't have things set up in it. So literally my Twitter feed is Cleveland and it's Indians and Browns, and that's it. Much like yourself, I was kind of like, I don't even follow a Man United account or anything on Twitter. Like, I don't keep up with it that way. I'll watch Match of the Day when it's on, and my kids, one of my lads is a United fan, the other one's an Everton fan, so they're always squabbling at the weekends and watching football. They don't watch football, they'll only watch soccer, so I kind of keep up with it through them. But interesting. It's an interesting kind of thing. Like, you see, like you really only have so much time to give, and I think that's where I have the problem with the basketball, is because now if the Indians are on, I go, oh no, because I want to look at that. I want to figure out, batting average. How do you figure that out? What's that? You know what I mean? And you start getting into looking at statistics and looking at players, and then I just don't think I have the brain capacity for another sport. I think I'm at my bandwidth is kind of at its maximum at the moment. So, yeah, interesting to see how that goes. Tell me this, Conor. Have you been? So this probably your first period of free agency where you have a decent understanding of what's going on.
Yeah.
And how have you found that as an experience?
I think, well, like last year, I think would have been actually fairly understanding, but in terms of this year, it's like really, really understand what's going on now. You know, it's like everything sort of clicks, and I think you see, like just coming back to your point there is kind of what I use I find really useful to actually get into a sport is playing like Madden or 2K or FIFA or whatever. If you're really trying to get into a sport by playing the game of the sport, you really start to understand just the rules and stuff that way. But you made a really interesting point actually about not having the time. It's like if I had tried to do NFL and NBA at the same time, it wouldn't have worked because you just don't have the ability to look. If you really want to go in depth, you just don't have the ability to do it at the same time. But in terms of just a free agency this year, to come back to your actual question, I find it like really interesting, particularly when you think the amount of players that we let go, you know, and you sort of expect from everything else. It's like, say, just to take soccer back into it, you're so used to barely any players leaving at the end of their contract. It's usually up or they're sold. So it's very much like to see 20 odd players go off into free agency, and not even just like players who are surplus to requirements. You see, like we're letting Demarius Randall or Joe Schobert go, but it's like these are big players, big names, and they're just going, and it's like a carousel, and it's much more of a carousel than practically any other sport on the planet, in my opinion. So obviously, I don't know much about the MLB. I have considered getting into it, but so I can't speak on behalf of MLB. But it's just interesting from that point of view. And then, but just the free agency period itself is such a whirlwind, and you're just constantly refreshing Twitter and all the Garofalo or Schefter, etc. And you're just waiting for some sort of big announcement or something for the Browns, you know, and I think, like, especially for this free agency period, it's been quite exciting. But from last year, you know, I'm bringing in a bit more caution this time because last year was so great and so much expectations that this year is kind of putting it back on the back burner. But I think that'll actually have a good knock-on effect for us, because I don't think we'll get as many primetime slots this year. So it'll be much easier for us to watch the games.
Every cloud is a silver lining, Conor.
Yeah.
And with the free agency, any player that's come in there that's taken your fancy, anyone you're looking forward to really seeing playing next year?
Yeah, well, Austin Hooper obviously stands out. Jack Conklin is probably the best pickup so far in that it protects Baker Mayfield, but I wouldn't say it's the flashiest or one like you're most excited about, unless you're talking about the knock-on effects for Baker Mayfield or Nick Chubb in particular, because I think this year is the year for Nick Chubb to win the rushing title. Should have won it last year as well, only for terrible play calling. But you know, I think Austin Hooper, although he's not the flashiest tight end, I just think the way he's going to fit into Stefanski's system, just with regard to the play action and the two tight end sets. I just think that it'll be really interesting to see how you have David Njoku to take the top off the defense, and then you'll have Austin Hooper to sit in the holes and just give Baker Mayfield an outlet, because as we know, especially from his college days, he likes throwing to the tight end, particularly when he had Mark Andrews. So that's one of the big ones. But I'm also interested to see how Karl Joseph plays. And I think that particularly with his injury sort of history now as well, but just to see him get in there, I think he'll bring a really good presence that we need, especially under Joe Woods. Just from the perspective of our tackling was atrocious last year, I feel like we were letting people just waltz into the end zone for the most part of the year. So and I think a part of that had to do with Greg Williams leaving, but I think that with someone like Karl Joseph, who hits as hard as Karl Joseph, it would be nice to have that presence in the backfield. But I think they're probably the two people on both sides of the ball I'm most excited for at the moment, to be honest.
And have you ventured into the college game at all, or what's your draft awareness like? Like it took me years to get in. I'd say on the last sort of 3 or 4 years, I've started watching college football and
Yeah.
started getting into it. Like I'm in a position now where when the draft comes up, I'm pretty solid on the first 2 rounds, maybe, of guys that are
Yeah.
coming out, and then whereas years ago I would, around the combine, I'd start going, ooh, better look at some.
Yeah.
But where are you on is your knowledge on that front?
Yeah, so with regards to like college football, the first couple of years as a fan, I was just focused on the NFL. This year though, I have been watching a bit more college football. I haven't had the chance to really digest it live as much as I'd like, but I've been watching a ton more highlights. Now, in regards to actual, I think I'm more like that kind of. I have a fairly good understanding of a good few of the players in the first and second round, kind of talent degree. But going beyond that, I wouldn't be as stark, so I'd be more reliant on, your Daniel Jeremiahs or all these sort of people who are really the draft savvy people. But college football is really interesting, especially it sort of takes a second to figure out there are some rule differences. But it's interesting just from the point of view of you're looking at it and you're seeing that these players will be in the NFL, and you're sort of getting an idea of who the Browns could realistically get and how they would translate to the team. So it's kind of just a fun, or doing the mock drafts and things, it's a bit of fun, and so it's good to be aware of the college game. And I also think that, especially when you're watching teams like LSU this year, you can see some outstanding play. And so it's good to watch sometimes as the NFL, if not better than some NFL games.
Have you any players in the college game caught your eye in the last year?
Yeah, so obviously you have your Chase Youngs and your Joe Burrows, obviously, but they're no hope for the Browns anyway. But I was just thinking that with regards to the few players that I was thinking of, if we decided to trade back, from the number 10 spot, because say for a purely hypothetical world, we traded a third and a fifth and got Trent Williams, we should trade back to 10th, really, realistically. But I was thinking we could take someone, say, like Xavier McKinney, who I think has been a solid player in college, and I think he'll translate well, and we need a safety. And especially, I still have no clue what's happening with Demarius Randall. I presume he's completely gone, but he's still floating around there. But you could also look at linebackers and like Patrick Queen or Kenneth Murray. So obviously Isaiah Simmons isn't going to fall to number 10. So these are all pipe dreams, but Patrick Queen is a really good player and Kenneth Murray is really good. So there's a good few players there floating around. Clavon Chason is an edge rusher that we could get if we don't get someone like Everson Griffin. So, there's a good few players in the first round there that are quite intriguing, but then you're talking wide receivers in the later rounds, looking maybe not going to fall too far, but like people like Donovan Peoples-Jones, or like there's a few players there that, might be interesting in later rounds. I don't think necessarily we need tight ends now at this stage with the two, but if we were looking for depth, I'm pretty sure you could look. Again, some injury concerns with Thaddeus Moss might be an interesting thing to look at in later rounds. Just for his ball hand, like his hands when it comes to catching, etc. So there's a good few players, and then you have the tackle class. Ezra Cleveland is an interesting prospect as well. So it'll be interesting to see. Antoine Winfield Jr. and Kyle Duggar, really interesting to see if we could pick them up in the second round if we don't trade back and get Xavier McKinney or someone. So
yeah, it'll be interesting to see, especially like, I don't know, I wouldn't be all that keen in trading a fifth and a third for Trent Williams. I think Trent Williams is going to end up shaking free there somehow. I think the compensation for him is going to be a lot less maybe than what anyone is thinking at the moment. I think it could come down to late round picks or pick swaps or something like that, because that's all going to end in tears. They're not working together. But much like what you said, I would be an advocate of maybe going and getting Trent Williams. I'd actually even consider having a look and kicking the tires on the likes of a Cordy Glenn or someone like that. Competent. He's maybe he's not a left tackle. He's not a left tackle for the future, but someone that
Yeah.
can play there now. We don't have to have the best O-line or the best left tackle or all the resources pumped into our O-line, but I think that would free us up then to trade back that pick. And I think where the meat of the draft is, Connor, is in that second, third round area. And a lot of those players you named, especially in the likes of the wide receivers, or someone out of the likes of Delpit, like Delpit's stock is down a little bit because he didn't play so well this year.
Yeah.
But if they were okay with him, players like that in the second round, this is the year to have a bag of second and third round.
Yeah.
And we don't, we're kind of, it's the fewest amount of draft picks I remember having in a long time. We're not flush there. I'm still waiting on the likes of maybe someone like Hunt or someone maybe getting moved on to bulk out our draft picks. I can see that happening. But we'll see. Connor, for a lad that's on in the door, draft wise, you're into it this year. You're all over it.
Yeah, well, more so than last year anyway. Now, last year I would have had a very, very superficial understanding of it, but this year I'm no expert, obviously, but I feel a lot more comfortable with the players and the sort of options that we have. It's interesting, the Grant Delpit pick. My only concern again is the main concern about Grant is the tackling, I feel, at the moment. So and with regards our terrible tackling, it's kind of, I think if he falls to the second round, it's definitely worth looking at, and because he's a great player, and I think it's the same thing with like Greedy Williams falling to the second round, and Greedy was an amazing player in college and everything. Is again, tackling was the concern. So I think you're right there that he is someone that probably might fall. But I'd say with someone like Andrew Berry in charge, we will be looking at trading back different places and getting more picks, and we will probably, I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the day we are looking at, say, 2 second rounders and 3 third rounders all together. The Kareem Hunt situation, I think, is interesting. Just purely because if he is moved on, I think we have a second round tender, is it?
Yeah.
Or is it second round?
But just so you know, no one's paying a second round tender for Kareem Hunt. That's not going to happen. It's never happened.
Yeah,
I don't think anyone has ever tendered a second round pick for anyone.
Yeah, especially for a running back. So the chances are he'll be back. And to be honest, I would like him back. I think he and Chubb together, it's a really interesting combination. And just for the point of view, you can have them on the field at the same time. You can have them both on the field at separate times, and they're still going to be very productive. So they allow a lot of flexibility in the offense of what you can and can't do. And especially with strong tight ends now, etc., we're going to be running the ball, I'd say, a lot more. So it makes a lot of sense to have 2 exceptional running backs in the backfield, I guess. But just having them back as well, just it gives that kind of leverage where if we wanted to move on, we probably would be able to get pretty good value for Kareem Hunt.
I think a likely scenario would be trading Hunt for a third, or some sort of pick swap arrangement or something in our favor, and then go and draft 4th, 5th round.
Could probably get AJ Dillon or someone in the later rounds.
Someone like an AJ Dillon in the 3rd, 4th round kind of area is where, like, because when you look at the production, Connor, my take on it, you look at what Kareem Hunt's production is going to be this year, and you transplant another running back that has a rookie contract, first year, draft in the 4th or 5th round. The difference in production in this offense, I think, is going to be, it's going to be minimal maybe for what we're paying. So when you're looking at your bang per buck in that room, I would say the picks are probably worth more, as in, drafted defensive tackle depth or edge depth with your round 3 pick, and pick up your running back with the extra pick or whatever. That means you have traded the value for money out of that running back room into edge rush, and like, it kind of makes sense. But then again, you know what, Connor? I'm not going to cry if Kareem Hunt is sitting there with Nick Chubb in that backfield come September. We're all winners there.
No, I totally agree. Actually, when you put it like that, it's just if we're going to be paying, I think if you're going to pay exorbitant rates for Kareem Hunt, but if you get a team-friendly deal with him, um, I guess I'm going to be very happy to keep him because again, he's from Cleveland and everything. He has that kind of feel. But if we got rid of him at the same time, we drafted someone who could have good production in the backfield because at the end of the day, Nick Chubb's going to carry the team. He's going to be the one who's carrying most of the production. So if you have Kareem Hunt there, he's a nice kind of bonus, but you could literally have a serviceable running back there beside him. You could have even someone like a Gus Edwards or someone in that level beside Nick Chubb, and he'll produce what he needs to produce when he needs to produce it, and
Exactly.
so,
literally someone coming off the street there to not match the same production. I'm not saying you get Kareem Hunt off the street, but similar type of production.
Yeah. Someone who can just share even a fraction less of the workload with Nick Chubb. But I guess the biggest benefit I would say from having Kareem Hunt is that he could balance out production with Nick Chubb close to the point where when we are renewing Nick Chubb's contract, if we do decide to renew it, and I hope we do for a good deal, but there's been less carries put on Nick Chubb's back to the point where he is not as worn down as someone like Todd Gurley or someone who has been carrying the offense completely by himself.
Yeah, no, I think the days of running backs getting the big, massive, sweet second contract are gone. I would not hold my breath for Nick Chubb coming back here after his rookie contract is over. Unfortunately, I just don't think, and especially with this regime, I just don't see them investing money in the position. And it's unfortunate, and we all love Nick Chubb, but it could be just the way business is going in the future. Look, Connor, we'll leave it there for today. It's been a pleasure chatting to you. Just like, and for reference, Connor's about, I could probably cycle to Connor's house from an hour from where I am here at the moment. We're not a million miles away from each other. We're going to have to hook up in person maybe for the coming year, and we'll treat you to a day out in Garvey's in Galway. We'll meet up with all the backers over there. It's a great day.
That would be awesome.
And
that'd be great.
We'll do that before the end of the season anyway. Thanks very much for joining us, Connor.
Thanks a million for having me.
If you're like me, then every Saturday in the fall is the best day of the week for you. There's nothing like waking up, turning on the TV, and getting ready for a whole day of college football action. Whether you're watching from the stadium or from the couch that day, there's still nothing like the excitement that builds as you wait for your favorite team to take the field. The problem, though, is that for most, this excitement only comes on Saturdays. Here at the Flagship Football Show, we think every day should be College Football Saturday. That's why the Flagship team works all week to bring you the best recaps, previews, interviews, topics, and discussions on all things Ole Miss football. Tune in every Wednesday for our new episode on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, and SoundCloud, and follow us on Twitter at Flagship FB Show and on Facebook at The Flagship Football Show to keep up with all our coverage. And remember to stay with us every single Wednesday all year as we bring you everything you need to know about the Flagship University in Mississippi on the Flagship Football Show.